Hey guys, today we will be presenting the Poisson distribution study, report written by Damien, Austin, and Dede. Here is our table of content. Introduction. When did we collect the data? It was at 11 a.m. on Thursday, November 10th. We choose our regular intersection of South Marietta Parkway Southeast and Fairground Street. The reason why we did that is to verify the vehicle arrival at an isolated intersection follow a Poisson distribution.
This is a satellite image of our intersection. We collected data on the eastbound moving traffic, while our companion group collected data on the southbound traffic.
Our effort of statement. Damien collected the data, worked on the discussion and the conclusion. Austin worked on the introduction and the result. Dede also worked on the introduction objective and the result.
After summarizing our field data, the total number of vehicles arriving during the observation period going eastbound is 287, while there were a total of 334 vehicles going southbound. Our average arrival rate, M, was 2.87. Our computed Poisson distribution was the computed probability of exactly 0 vehicles to 9 vehicles arriving during an interval, which is a total of 1, and using our calculated M, which is 2.87 vehicles per interval. This graph shows us a comparison of our observed frequency versus our Poisson distribution. As we can see, our observed frequency follows a similar trend as our Poisson distribution. Our next graph shows us the comparison analysis of eastbound and southbound observed frequency versus Poisson distribution. The first step to calculating our chi-square in the goodness of fit test is to solve for the degree of freedom. Our k is 7, so our degree of freedom is 5. The second step is to calculate our chi-square using the formula in step 2. Then using the 5 degrees of freedom and 5% significance level, our chi-square critical shown on step 3 table is 11.070.
First up is the degrees of freedom, which are a max number of logically independent variables in a test. It's calculated using the equation k-2, with k being the observed values in the test. And for our purposes, if the frequency exceeded 5 per vehicle, that's when we counted it. And so our k value was 7. 7 minus 2 is 5, and that's seen in the red. Group 2 had a degree of freedom of 6. Next up is the chi-square computed values. These are computed from the equation, and they take into account observed and expected frequencies. We see 11.8 for our group and 16.27 for group number 2. The chi-square critical value is based off the degrees of freedom, and we got 11.07 for our group and 12.59 for group 2. Both the computed and the critical value are pivotal in determining whether we reject our hypothesis further on. We also had a couple sources of error. Vehicles would come down the eastbound left turning lane, and there are 2 driveways where businesses are off the side of the road. Sometimes they would be counted in to the frequency, and we wouldn't see them leave until the last second. So there may be some cars counted in the data that were not actually present. Our initial hypothesis was that the data would follow a Poisson distribution, but because of our computed chi-square value of 11.8 was greater than our critical chi-square value of 11.07, we will have to reject the hypothesis. This is the same thing that happened with Group 2, who is responsible for the southbound data. They did have a larger computed value than a critical, and therefore their hypothesis is also nullified. For an event to reflect a Poisson distribution, it needs to be consistent and all the events need to be independent. So there's obviously some external factor influencing the events, especially for group 2. It's difficult to determine what that might be, but there could be things such as road work, events letting out, lots of people getting off work all at once, and then that would explain the large influxes of vehicles coming through all at once and then not, and then coming through again. And this might explain why their computed chi-square value was so far off of their critical. Here's our reference to the lab manual, and that concludes our presentation.